This podcast is brought to you by Rebel News. That's right. So if you want to support us, why not do it in a win-win fashion by shopping for yourself? One of my favorite things to do. Head to rebelnewsstore.com to pick the patriotic gear that pleases your heart. And while you're there, use coupon code DREA10 to save while you do.
Carney won. What now? I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and you're watching The Gun Show. Thanks to the systemic and historic inequities of Confederation, the Prime Minister of Canada was chosen for us long before Westerners were even done at the ballot box. Do we freak out? Do we languish in morose and malaise, or do we get up and figure out what to do next? I am of the latter mindset rather than the former, and I think my guest today is the very same way. In fact, even on election day, she told me to stop being such a doomer. And I wish I had listened to her, because it's not over. I think the fight for something better begins now. And so my guest from last week, Chris Sims, last week she joined the show to break down what the different economic platforms meant from each party. Well, she joins me now to talk about what the election means going forward for the Canadian taxpayer and what we all need to do next. So joining me now is my friend Chris Sims in an interview I recorded earlier today. Take a listen. So joining me now is my good friend of freedom and good friend to the taxpayers, Chris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Now, Chris was on the show last week pre-election to break down the economic platforms of both parties. Now we know the election outcome. Despite our best efforts out here in the West, we will have Mark Carney as the minority Prime Minister of Canada. And I want to know what that means now for my and your family's bottom line. Chris, thanks for coming on the show. Do I have to get real good at strangling geese in a public park? What comes next?
Of course, what she's talking about is this study that the Privy Council, which is basically the permanent bureaucracy of the Prime Minister's office, they came out with a study saying, yeah, things are going to get really grim in the future, not too far in the future, where people will have to forage for food in public parks. And I love how you said strangle geese, Sheila, because of course, Mark Carney wants to take all of our guns.
Right.
So we won't be able to hunt for our elk anymore, or moose or whatever. Even pheasant, I guess, will be off the menu because they're harder to catch. We're going to have to go to the slow moving geese and just choke them out.
Yeah.
So in all seriousness, for the finances, yeah, we're probably in for a bit of trouble with Carney, but I wanted to give people a pep talk first. Okay?
Yes, please.
This is a very slim minority. Okay. It is not nearly as strong a minority that Trudeau had with Singh. Okay. Yes, I'm looking at the seat math, as I call it. It doesn't look awesome because it looks as if the NDP will be able to support the Liberals, at least on a vote-by-vote basis.
And they don't deserve that. They do not deserve that. They completely collapsed, and they're the reason Mark Carney got the seats that he did. They don't deserve now to continue to hold the balance of power, which is, at the end of the day, holding the electorate hostage.
Yeah, and that's what's going to happen for a while, at least. And as of right now, the NDP doesn't have a leader. So I would say for the foreseeable future, that's what's going to happen, is they'll just kind of vote along to get along with him, with Carney. So that's a thing. But to the points that people have been sharing around the last couple of days, the conservative vote, if that's what you were going for, okay, the conservative vote was so high. Like, when Stephen Harper won his majority, I think he got about 39.6% of the vote. Maybe a little less, but it was 39. Pierre Poilievre, I think it was close to 42 or 43%.
Yep.
By the end of it. So he hit such a high watermark. We haven't seen that big a popular vote for the blue team since the 80s. Like, Hangin' Tough was like number 1 on the charts with New Kids. Sorry, I have to work New Kids into our hit because it makes me happy. Hangin' Tough was topping the charts back in the day when the last time the Conservatives pulled this high. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because, of course, Pierre Poilievre was promising to get rid of all carbon taxes, so nuke the carbon tax from orbit. He was promising to reverse all of the gun grab laws, which would have been awesome. He was promising to get rid of all of the censorship laws, which is, again, outstanding, and we need that for our free expression. And he was going to defund the media, which is a huge factor here. So this is why I understand the vast majority of our viewers right now will be kind of wondering what's next. So what I think is going to happen next is, I believe, this is my hunch, I have not talked to them, I believe that Pierre Poilievre will have to find a dark blue seat, so he'll have that monkey off of his back. He'll officially have a seat back in the House of Commons, and this has happened before. There's been cases where we've had political leaders, obviously, who don't have seats in the legislature or parliament
Jagmeet
before.
Singh didn't.
Sure, exactly, exactly. Danielle Smith didn't when she first became premier. Yes. So
Jim
this has happened before.
Prentice. Jim
Thank
Prentice neither.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this does happen. Was it a scorpion sting at the end of the day for him? Yeah, for sure. That would have been really rough to see those numbers. Yeah, but fixable. So what he needs to do is he needs to find now, and this is just structurally, this would happen if it were any party.
Right.
So in this situation, what the party leader does is they find a loyal soldier to take, fall on the sword and offer up their seat. And then what they need to do is they need to file for their request to have a by-election. And then it is up to the prime minister when a by-election in that riding is called. Typically, in tradition, it's within 3 to 6 months.
Right.
So really fast. However, Pierre Poilievre is still the official, His Majesty's official loyal opposition leader. He'll stay in Stornoway. That's his official residence. None of that changes. For him, his wife, and his kids, all that stuff will stay the same right now. But technically, he does obviously want to get a seat back in the House of Commons.
As quick as possible.
Yes, as quick as possible.
There's nothing I would enjoy more as a parliament nerd than seeing Pierre Poilievre axe murder that robotic prime minister that we have in question period, which is why I think Carney will, and he loves to use hockey analogies, rag the puck on that by-election as long as possible. Because I think the more people get to see his bad performances in the House of Commons, the less people are going to like him.
He can try. I think that would upset an awful lot of people, including...
I don't think he cares.
Yeah, maybe not. But I'm trying to pep talk here, Sheila.
I'll stop being the doom scroller of this interview. I'll stop.
I was texting her on election night. I'm like, cheer up, damn it.
I knew.
I know. But it was early. It was the Nova Scotia numbers, the initial ones we were seeing. And I was seeing, at the time, a 4-seat gain. It turned into not be a 4-seat gain in Atlantic Canada for the Conservatives. But anyway, I digress. So first things first, I believe structurally what they're going to do is find Pierre Poilievre a safe seat to run in, get the by-election done. 2, I think the answers are still the same and the arguments are still the same. It's about affordability. Like, normal people cannot afford basic elements of life here. And so I think the 2 elements will be affordability and the strangling control of Ottawa.
Yeah.
And so with affordability, they need to keep on fighting to get rid of the industrial carbon tax, which he is going to roll out any second now.
Yeah.
And it is going to be mega expensive. We're trying to find out how expensive. Okay. 2, he's going to introduce his brand new carbon tax tariffs, which are separate and apart from the industrial carbon tax. So this, for folks who don't know, Carney loves carbon taxes so much. He describes them as a cornerstone to his belief system for the world. And that's in his book. anyone who's not read his book yet, pitter patter.
Yeah.
You must. I'm sorry, borrow it from the library if you don't want to give him money. Get your hands on Mark Carney's book. Read this thing.
Yeah.
Because he's now the prime minister and he's got a very good chunk of seats in the House of Commons. And it looks like it's going to be that way for a while.
And he kept the climate radicals, you know.
He did. All of them
the
are
same
there.
old Trudeau climate radicals are going to be in his cabinet too.
Guilbeault is there. All the anti-oil people, all the anti-energy people, all the anti-production people. They're all there. I'm sorry, but they are.
Yeah.
So the elements we will be focusing on are the industrial carbon tax that goes along with carbon tax tariffs, which are going to make stuff in your store cost more because Carney's going to hit them with a tariff. The censorship laws, okay, which he is a huge fan of, okay. We will be fighting those. We'll be fighting to defund the media because obviously people can't be on government payroll and still be a journalist. It's a huge conflict of interest and a big waste of money.
And we saw that at play in this election.
Mm-hmm. You did.
I literally did.
I know. You literally did. Yeah, I saw. I think, did you have to duck? Maybe I dreamt that part. I was watching your video.
People were throwing paper.
Goodness gracious. This is like a bad cafeteria scene in a 1980s movie. So the elements we will be fighting are things like the industrial carbon tax, the new carbon tax tariffs that are going to make your life more expensive. We're going to fight the censorship on one side of the vice and the funding of the media on that other side of that vice. We're going to be fighting the gun grab, okay? Those are all still very strong elements of this fight. And to give people some encouragement here, and again, this is going along with the fact that in this case, the blue team was going to reduce how much they were putting down on the debt. They were going to reduce your taxes more than the red team. They were going to scrap all the carbon taxes. They were going to scrap the gun grab, and they were going to cancel the censorship plans, all of those things. If the red team had been pushing for all of those things in earnest all this time, I'd be saying the same thing. So all that understood, did you see the youth vote? There's a survey that apparently my 17-year-old told me this because, you know, I'm not 17, so I don't follow it.
Right.
But there's a youth vote survey that happens each time.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives won it.
Yeah.
I've never seen that in my life. It's always been Green or NDP or something.
Yep.
But this time it's young people saying, and I can't blame them because they want to afford a house. You know?
Of course. And I know that I've been a doomer. But
That's
I shouldn't.
okay.
But I shouldn't be, because I was thinking about, you know, like, we know the boomers in Ontario, and if you didn't vote for the Liberals, I'm not talking about you quit writing me emails. Look, I know that the women elected Justin Trudeau. I don't take offense to that because I didn't vote for him. It's not me. I didn't do it. But I know the Eastern boomers, they cared about fighting Trump. That's, if you look at the polling data, that's what they said. And, you know, they cared about fighting Trump tariffs, but they are the people least affected by the tariffs. And so here's my like bright spot in this mess. The Conservatives actually swept the ridings most affected by the tariffs. The Conservatives snatched Windsor.
Oh, did they keep that one?
From the hands of the left.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Those are auto workers, blue collar unionized jobs, which normally vote NDP. They're voting Conservative. Now they see as the Conservatives as the best people to fight Trump, regardless of what the insulated retirees in Toronto have to say.
And endorsed the Conservatives.
Yes, that's a new one. Like,
that is a total new one.
It's not all that interesting to see, like, the steel workers in Alberta endorse the Conservatives. They build pipelines, of course. Sure. They build refineries. That's fine. But when you see unions in Ontario coming out to support the Conservatives, that's a new coalition forming that I think is longer lasting than whatever strange boomer lefty greenie coalition that Mark Carney has cobbled together. We're seeing young people, like young people, the next generation of voters are Conservative, blue collar people, families, business people, and Indigenous people are voting Conservative. Chief Billy Morin swept his seat. Ellis Ross swept his seat. This is a new development. Again, Indigenous people in Alberta, of course, they vote Conservative. Why? Because there is no more an Indigenous industry than the oil and gas sector. Provides good jobs in Indigenous communities where you get to stay in your community and break from generational poverty. But to see that happening in British Columbia is a little bit something different. So it gives me hope for a longer lasting movement to be built upon.
Yeah. Ellis Ross was, for folks who don't know him, I don't know him well, but being from BC, I kind of picked up a bit more what he was saying. He was a chief. He was a government leader in his regional area before he became into provincial. Before he got into provincial politics. He ran for the leadership of the BC Liberals. They were foolish to not put him forward. Because he's I would describe him as very fair-minded. Like doesn't have a mean bone in his body.
Nope.
But he fights for his people, for his territory, and for workers. Yeah. And so having him come along to the federal, think of this. He was a bit more, I would describe him as progressive in
centrist.
BC. Yeah, centrist, right? And now he's come along to the federal Conservatives. And he is fighting against things like pipeline bans, and he's against things like energy caps, and he's against things like carbon taxes. So because he knows that those big government policies just impoverish working people.
Yeah.
The same thing as tariffs. Tariffs only hurt working people with both their job losses and making stuff at our stores cost more. Rich people don't notice that stuff because they don't know how much milk costs. They don't know how much vegetables cost. Like when Carney said, I don't do the grocery shopping, I believe him. Yeah. He has the help go do that. So this is the big difference here. And so I wanted to encourage people that we've been doing this fight in particular with things like carbon taxes, pipeline bans, energy caps, censorship, those kind of gun grabs, those elements of the fight. We've been doing this now for years. So they're not changing. So we know how those feel in our hands. We know how to mobilize. We know how to push back on them. And they reduced the minority right down to like this big.
Yeah.
So, and what I was interested in, I don't know if those numbers stood up. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did the Conservatives get 1 million more votes than Ontario Premier Doug Ford did in Ontario?
Yes.
That's big.
Doug Ford, in spite of his sabotage, him and his cronies, this is me saying this, not you, Chris. Doug Ford and his cronies, with their aspirations on the Prime Minister's chair, willing to sabotage the Conservatives and sell the rest of us out in the West in the middle of an election campaign, saying the Conservatives, the federal party doesn't know how to campaign. Well, they smoked Doug Ford's numbers in his own province. Yeah. And what a wild thing to say, especially after all those people who volunteered to get Doug Ford elected were part of the federal campaign. What, like, you're shooting inside the house, Doug Ford.
That was strange. I know. I'll give you a really concrete example of my puzzlement over what is going on in Queen's Park.
Oh, I'm not puzzled. I know. I figured it out. But anyway, I'll be quiet.
I'm trying to be dainty.
I know.
And you're like, and I see what you're doing. I'll give you Hamilton, for example. So going back to the industrial carbon tax, going back to the trade unions endorsing the federal Conservatives, the pipe workers of Hamilton who work in the steel industry came out with their face and in print saying, we endorse the Conservatives, the blue team, this time around because they're promising to get rid of the industrial carbon tax. They say the Carney industrial carbon tax will, quote, decimate, meaning obliterate, decimate the steel industry in and around Hamilton. Hamilton, last I checked, is in the province of Ontario.
Yeah.
Okay. Big time. Ford likes to put on a hard hat and a high visibility vest the way a lot of politicians like to. Okay. Playing dress up there. What is he doing? Not coming out swinging against Carney's industrial carbon tax.
Right.
In the same way Scott Moe did. Of like, it's on like Donkey Kong. Danielle Smith, she came out against it, but in more of a stay out of my backyard sort of way, because she wants provincial control over everything. But Moe, like full on said, stop it with this industrial carbon tax nonsense. And so, but Ford wasn't there. He didn't
Yeah.
show up. So
No.
from a working person perspective, which is supposed to be his base,
Right.
like steelworkers in Hamilton, he
Right.
needs to keep those folks, but he didn't come out and defend them, which
Yeah.
was astonishing.
Yeah, and the auto sector in Windsor. You know, you look at what happened during this campaign. John Rustad went out strong for Polyev. Danielle Smith, strong for Polyev. Scott Moe, strong for Polyev. Brad Wall. He came out of retirement as Canada's most popular premier for 10 years and endorsed Polyev. So you got 4 superstars. I mean, the only other person I could think of is a message from beyond the grave from Ralph Klein. And Doug Ford is standing there with Carney.
Yeah.
Selling out his fellow conservative premiers.
So
anyway.
in financially, they're not balancing budgets in that province. Like there's a lot of fiscal mess.
Oh yeah.
There. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. Did you want to quickly touch on what Smith is doing with the referendum changes?
I will. As a last topic, first thing I want to talk to you about is, okay, so Mark Carney promises to spend $100 billion more than Justin Trudeau. Apparently he's the calm, wise banker who's just making it rain with cash. And while the rest of us have to bait in raccoons down at the playground. And almost instantly, Fitch, which is like a credit rating company, Fitch Ratings, comes out and says, not even 24 hours after Carney's elected, they're saying that Canada is risking losing its AAA rating if the Liberals actually do what they campaigned on, which is what the rest of us have been saying. We can't afford this. And now the international credit ratings organizations are saying, yeah, you can't do that. It's bad because you can't foist that debt load upon the taxpayer and not think that there are going to be real implications for your country's finances. Yeah,
this is trying not to be grim, but this part is grim. This is a problem. I was legitimately surprised. I thought I was misreading it when it came out on that Saturday during the campaign that Carney's going to add more money to the debt than Trudeau was planning to.
Right.
So I thought that maybe high level, like an average person would have viewed Carney as, oh, he's a banker, so he'll be fiscally responsible because he's a money guy. Turns out the banker is going to be worse with money than the drama teacher.
Yep.
I did not expect that, but it's a reality. So this is what he's planning. And you're right that the international credit rating agencies are really on top of this. This is the problem if that happens. So we pay interest on the debt. So right now the debt is about $1.2 trillion. We pay billions and billions and billions of dollars every single year just in the interest payment on that debt. Ugh. It in fact eclipses how much the feds give the provinces for healthcare. So the next time you hear somebody say, oh, what about our vaunted healthcare system? Well, we're paying more just on our credit card interest payment on the stupid debt than we're paying technically for healthcare.
Right.
If our credit rating diminishes, that goes up. In the same way that you can't borrow at a good rate if you've got bad credit, this would result basically in the country of Canada having bad credit. So that means that our interest rate is higher. Our borrowing rate becomes higher. So this is why that's really important. And so at this point, I'm hoping that Carney, with his PhD from Oxford in economics, really does have good connections with smart, fiscal-minded people around the world. I truly hope this, because they need to talk to him and sober him up and say, no, bro, you can't do this. I know what you said during the election or whatever. I don't care what he has to say.
Yeah.
He can't screw up our credit rating worse than it is right now. He needs to completely pull back on this crazy spending plan and adding to the debt plan. He calls it investing. Countries only have taxpayers' money. Investing is spending, okay? He cannot separate his operating budget from his capital budget. It's all taxpayers' money. It's all spending. So he needs to actually have a serious, sober second thought and look at this line by line, talk to really good financial advisors and figure out how to stay on this side of the black so that we aren't nailed with higher interest costs as taxpayers. But yeah, that's a real possibility.
Yeah. And then it becomes a fiscal hole we just cannot dig ourselves out of. Now, let's talk about what's happening in Alberta. We're recording this on Wednesday. It will go to air on Wednesday, late Tuesday afternoon. Didn't even give Carney 24 hours. Madam Premier Danielle Smith just actually made the Citizens Initiative Act a usable law in this province, because before it wasn't. She made it so that just 10% of eligible voters in the province, now that may vary depending on population, but 10% of eligible voters could, if within 90 days, sign a petition to petition the province to allow Albertans to hold a referendum on separation, independence. I don't know what that looks like, but it actually became something that is surmountable instead of the prior iteration of the law, which was designed to fail. Tell me what you think about that.
So the Taxpayers Federation, we are the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So we're national. So we aren't telling people what to think about this, what the question would be on a referendum. However, as far as the mechanisms of direct democracy and having referendums, we're all over that. We love that. We think that we need lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government. And often the way to achieve those three things is to have smaller, more local government that is responsive to you. And a great way to hold governments to account, of course, is through referendums. So for folks who are watching outside of Alberta, love you guys, always tune in, share, send this to your friends. In Alberta, we have a lot of direct democracy.
Yeah.
We can have voter recall at the provincial level and at the municipal level and at the school board level, if we really want to. So that's a big deal. We have to have a referendum. I'll put it this way. We have the Taxpayer Protection Act. And if for some reason the government wanted to raise our taxes or introduce new ones, they would need to win a referendum from the people to do that.
Right.
Which is amazing.
Right.
So yeah, that's direct democracy. We love that because it gets people engaged. It gives them a voice to be heard. It gives them agency. It keeps politicians in line a lot better than having none of these things. And it saves a lot of money because in this case, we don't have a sales tax.
Right.
That saves families millions and millions and millions of dollars here in Alberta every year by not having a PST. We don't have a PST because the province would need to get a yes vote from the people before doing that. Or they would have to scrap the legislation entirely, and then it would be on like Donkey Kong if they tried something like that. So seeing Danielle Smith come out and say, I'm not going to presuppose what the question would be. It frankly could be on anything. It could be on having a provincial police force. It could be on a pension. It could be on, I don't know, renaming a provincial park. Anything.
Right.
Do we want a provincial official dog mascot? Whatever. She came out and said, yeah, we're going to make this usable so that if you get enough people who are signing on to a petition, that will then allow them to put forward a referendum question on whatever. So that was really good to see just from a direct democracy standpoint.
Yeah, it's good to see a government that is putting checks on its own power.
It is.
It's rare. it's
as hen's teeth, it is rare.
Yes. Now, Chris, tell me and tell the rest of the people watching how they can get involved in the good work that the CTF does to advocate for smaller government and on behalf of taxpayers.
So again, I wanted to reach out to people, especially if the vote didn't go the way you wanted it to. Don't be scared. Just channel that frustration into the fight.
Right.
So, because this is how we win, okay? If you take a look at it, really, we made the Liberal government have to blink over the carbon tax. They got so freaked out about the carbon tax that they had to climb down on it, at least for now.
For now.
That is still a victory, okay? We've had a lot of victories lately. We also made them climb down on the capital gains tax increase, okay? So this is what happens when push comes to shove. And governments will come and go, but it's because of advocacy organizations like the Taxpayers Federation, and there are others. We're
Yep.
not the only game in town. But it's because of advocacy organizations that are run by real people, grassroots people, hundreds of thousands of people.
Thrift
okay?
shoppers.
Thank you. Thrift shoppers. Thank you. Because if you sign up, go to our website, taxpayer.com, sign one of the petitions that speaks to you. To Sheila's point, I think I've still got one on there that removes the sales tax from thrift shops because it's wrong to punish poor people
Right.
with taxes. It's disgusting, especially on a used item that has already been taxed. So sign a petition that speaks to you. Do you want to cancel all carbon taxes? Do you want to scrap the gun grab? Do you want to defund the media? There are all sorts of things there for folks to sign up for. And then you're part of the Tax Fighter Army. Okay. I usually have a Tax Fighter Army t-shirt, but this is why we can't have nice things.
I love it.
I love that one. I like your shirt too.
Thank you.
So sign those petitions and then you're part of that army and you'll get our email updates of the next time it's time to get out there and mass email a politician, come to a pub night, attend a rally, really speak up for yourself. So go to our website, taxpayer.com, join the Fellowship of Tax Fighters, and that's where you can stand up and be heard.
Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show 2 weeks back to back to explain why there is still hope
Yes.
left in this country. Appreciate
There
it.
absolutely is. And I think we all needed this. Anybody can text me or email me anytime.
Well, we've come to the portion of the show where I turn it over to you. I give the third segment over to my viewers because without you, there's no Rebel News. So if you have something to say about the show that I recorded today, send me a letter. I'll give you my email address right now. It's sheila@rebelnews.com. Put gun show letters in the subject line so I know exactly why you're writing to me because I do get a lot of emails in a day. Or even better, if you're finding a clip of the show or if you've shared a clip of the show with your friends, either from YouTube or Rumble, encourage them to leave a comment because I do go looking for those comments. And then we can have a little bit of a symbiotic relationship because those comments push us higher up in the algorithms so that more people see us. The algorithms then serve us up to more people based on the amount of engagement and interaction that we get. So it's good for you. It's good for me, and we spread the good word of conservatism throughout the land. But it's not always comments from clips of the show that I go looking for. I want to know what you guys are saying all the time about our work. It helps me help our journalists here at Rebel News. And so today's viewer feedback actually comes from a clip of our daily live stream that I host. It's called Rebel Roundup, and I have like a rotating stable of co-hosts. Lise Merle, my friend from Saskatchewan, hosts on Tuesdays and Wednesdays with me. And on Tuesday's show, we looked at a breakdown of the issues for voters in this country. And it showed that young people voted conservative for change, for affordability, for crime, housing prices, and the largest demographic of the Canadian population for boomers, their number one issue was none of those things. They voted for Mark Carney because they wanted Mark Carney to fight with Trump. And it's kind of funny because today Trump comes out and says, yeah, I really like Mark Carney. He's my guy.
Are you interested in rebuilding relations with Canada? And if so, how?
No, well, I think we're going to have a great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, "Let's make a deal." You know, he was running for office. They both hated Trump, and it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy. But no, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer, and I congratulated him. You know, it was a very mixed signal because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country. It's a pretty tight race, but he's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
So you think they're gonna fight? Or is Carney just going to give Trump everything he wants? Anyway, that was their number one issue. And I think it worked to the Liberals' favor, of course, because the Liberals are the government again for the fourth term. Their corruption and mismanagement has been rewarded by people who are generally not touched by their corruption and mismanagement. And so I went looking at the YouTube comments for what you folks at home had to say. And again, I say this constantly. If you are a boomer and you didn't vote for Carney, this isn't about you. Don't write me that email, okay? In the same regard that I know women kept voting for Justin Trudeau, I don't take offense to that, even though I'm a woman, because I know it had nothing to do with me. I didn't do it. So if I'm talking about boomers and you're a conservative boomer, this isn't you. You're not the bad guy. You voted for your grandchildren. So anyway, these are the comments from that video, and I thought they were pretty darn insightful. Ms. Sparkles and Glitter writes, imagine being more preoccupied by a U.S. president who's been in office for 3 months than the current governing Liberals who have ruled for nearly a decade. Isn't that right? How easily distracted these people are. Kelly Cathcart says, I'm a boomer and I never felt Trump was a concern for me. My grandchildren's future was my concern. Shame on anyone who voted Liberal. Our boomers are better than their boomers. It's obvious. Meow on a mission, right? If only they knew Trump was an American. Yeah. Trump didn't give us the crime. Trump didn't give us the inflation. Trump didn't block our pipelines. In fact, he wants our pipelines. Trump didn't do any of the out-of-control immigration here in Canada. Trump didn't censor our internet or fund our media. Trump didn't do that. The Liberals did. And the Liberal boomers just voted for more of that. So people voted over Trump. I'm a boomer and have never voted Liberal. This is from Kimberly K3928. Kimberly, are you from Alberta? Because our boomers are really great here. My goodness, how dumb. My grandkids need a better government. Yeah. Ensign Red Shirt Ricky says, when Carney taxes their home equity, boomers will realize they brought this on themselves. Diplomatic One 3595 says, so people basically looked at the last 10 years and said, yep, more of the same, please. Yeah, I guess so. And as a Westerner, what can we do? We voted as conservative as we possibly could. But we can't carry this country. It doesn't work that way. And even though the mainstream media was calling the election before our votes were counted here in Alberta, that is actually the way it works. And so something has got to change. I don't know what that is. The people of Alberta will decide for themselves. On that somber note, that's the show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see everybody back here in the same time in the same place next week. And as always, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.